Welcome to Off the Cuff, and in the studio today we are hosting State Representative Abdullah Hammoud and Senator David Knezek, and they're going to be talking to us about what's going on in Lansing and a little bit of what's happening nationally. Welcome to Off the Cuff, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to have you both. The Health Care Act. Giggles. Absolutely. It's funny, but it's terrifying at the same time. 23 million Americans may be losing their health care benefits, and it looks like a certain portion of our society will be benefiting, and a lot of others who really need this help are going to be the ones who are the target of losing their health care, and it's life and death. Abdullah, what is your take on this?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity actually this last week to read through the Congressional Budget Office's analysis of it. And,
Good, you're one of those that reads it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Using the words of former President Obama, the meanness that's just ingrained in this package of bills can't be amended out. It certainly strips away healthcare from the most vulnerable of populations. The younger generation, our seniors, protections regarding those two populations. Additionally, it really does provide these big tax breaks to the really wealthy and business and corporations and insurance companies. That is at the core of this healthcare package. And as I read it, I couldn't believe it, that they were just eliminating all these taxes that were put in place to make healthcare more affordable. Additionally, the stripping of billions of dollars from Medicaid. I don't know what the reasoning is. I can't logically understand what the reasoning is. And I come from a public health background. I worked in various healthcare systems and health insurance companies. And I don't know what the reasoning is for how they put this package together.
So many people are going to be suffering. So many people are going to lose their lives because of this. And it is really, and I'm going to say it as it is, it is a health care act that really benefits the more affluent members of our country, and really targeting the marginalized. So, Senator, what are we doing about this, and what can we do as a state maybe to even combat this kind of thing?
So when folks ask about the healthcare piece, my first response is to say that there were mistakes that we need to fix within the Affordable Care Act. Anybody who comes in and says it's 100% wrong is wrong, and anybody that comes and says that it's 100% right, they're wrong too. So we need to identify what is good and what is working and make sure that we continue to build upon that. And for the things that aren't working, we need to either get rid of them or reform them. And when I think about the impact that we would have here in the state of Michigan, the representative talked about Medicare, Medicaid. When we did Medicaid expansion here in the state of Michigan, we estimated that 400,000 people would sign up to get health care for the first time ever. As it stands today, there's almost 650,000 people in Michigan who have health care today that didn't have it 5 years ago. So if we were to come in and pull the rug out from underneath folks who have access to preventative care services, who have access to a primary care physician, who aren't going into a hospital setting again and clogging up our hospital system, it's going to be a huge ripple effect throughout the entire economy, number one. And when you think about what we were told throughout the presidential election, the president told us no cuts to Medicare, no cuts to Medicaid, and he said on multiple occasions that he wanted every single person in this country to receive health care. I think that needs to be the goal as we look towards the future of health care in this country. How do we ensure that every single American receives access to health care? And how do we do so in a way that doesn't burden those of us who are at the middle or the bottom of our country when it comes to their socioeconomic status? Like the rep said, the bill as it stands today takes away health care from 23 million people, gives a huge tax break to those who are wealthy and well-connected, while the people that we represent here in Dearborn and Dearborn Heights and the surrounding communities are left struggling and are left wondering how they're going to afford health care and how they're going to get access to health care moving forward. And so it's a really dangerous proposition for everybody.
Absolutely, and I think being able to get over that hump with pre-existing conditions was a huge, huge win for our country. And now, that particular thing is in jeopardy, and everything we've moved forward with in regards to health care is in jeopardy. This administration has. You went back and you said, well, he said he was going to do this. He said he was going to do a lot of things, and he says that he's on that track. But obviously, we've seen very, very differently. This administration has brought forth so many different changes, especially in education, and I know both of you are very, very passionate about that concept. And with the appointment of DeVos, we're looking at the student loans that were going to be addressed. Now that's going to be taken away from a lot of students who were really counting on that. I know you've both been very, very active in that kind of legislation. Representative Abdullah, what are we doing as a state to address this?
Yeah. So just to summarize, Betsy DeVos has come in, and there's a program in place under the Obama administration that for those working in some sort of public service capacity, they pay back their loans and are forgiven after 10 years of repayment without missing a month of payment within those 10 years. And they want to come and strike away this program, and so to extend out to 20 years of payments instead of the 10.
It's a loan forgiveness program.
Yes, right? Okay. Yes, and so and it's based on it's income based. So, however, if your income rises, so does the repayment back to these loans. From a state perspective, our hands are kind of tied, I believe, and maybe the senator has other thoughts about what we can do on this specific issue when it comes down to these federal loans. But certainly from the state level, I, alongside several of my colleagues, are working on pieces of legislation that would provide some sort of tax break for those repaying the loans. Beyond opposed to popular belief that student loans are something that the younger individuals actually suffer from. It's actually been proven that it's the parents of the students or the grandparents of the students who are the ones repaying back these loans, and they're the ones who would be suffering on behalf of on many of these reforms. And so it's not an issue that's just focused on the millennials. It is an issue that certainly affects a wide range of people.
I always think that public servants are the ones that really give of their time, their effort, and really, really put of themselves in regards to making sure things are taken care of. The correct legislation is out there, and yet it seems like public servants are the ones that are being targeted the most in regards to pension and retirement plans, and our fire, our schools, teachers. I know that you're very involved in that conversation as well, Senator David.
We just had a package of bills that was passed by the House and the Senate last week that seeks to completely overhaul the way that we provide a secure retirement for the folks who work in our system of education. So, it's not just teachers, it's the parapros, it's the custodial staff, the folks who are driving our kids to and from school on the bus. I take my brother as an example. He's on his third year teaching mathematics in Melvindale High School. He makes $30,000 a year after his taxes and his health care and everything is taken out.
And look at all the people he's affecting. Those kids, our future. I mean,
and after everything's taken out of his paycheck, the guy takes home $900 every 2 weeks to, like you just said, educate the future generations to come in and become a part of society as well. And so, you'll talk to teachers and they'll say to you, I don't need a lot of money on the front end because at least I know I'm going to have a secure retirement on the back end. That no longer exists because of what the state has done to overhaul the system. And so it begs a lot of questions about how are we going to attract qualified people into the field of education. I think about when I was a student at the School of Ed at U of M Dearborn 5 years ago, enrollment has dropped 50% in the last 5 years because every single bill that's coming out of Lansing is an attack on the people who stand in front of the classroom every day. And what's even more concerning as we look to the future, legislators want to go after police and fire next, not just on the pension side of things, but on the healthcare side of things as well. And not just for people who are coming into the system, but people who are currently working and people who are already retired. And so this, again, hits close to home for me because my father's a retired police officer here in Dearborn Heights. But again, think about this, and I've been saying this to everybody that I can throughout the district. When it's time for re-election or time for election, who are the first groups that every politician go to? The police and the fire.
Right.
They want the picture, they want the endorsement, they want to be standing there with the uniforms to put on their literature. And now those same politicians are getting ready to take away a secure retirement and health care from who are supposed to be their friends. Right. So if politicians in Lansing are willing to do that,
they're the people that protect us.
If they're willing to do that to our public servants, and if they're willing to do that to people who are supposed to be their friends, just imagine what they're willing to do to people like you and me, people who might not have any sort of impact on their election other than the vote. The politicians in Lansing today, they really have no concern or regard for what it means to be a regular citizen, a working citizen, somebody who wakes up early and goes to bed late just trying to make an honest living in this state.
And if I may add, when it came to teachers' pensions, the leadership in the House and the Senate and the governor addressed no issue. They rather went after a pension plan that's 100% funded. I think that's important for the public to know, that this wasn't a pension plan with an existing liability. In fact, this was a pension plan that was a 100% funded, and they thought to try to do best to close down this pension plan and push them away from a secure retirement plan. And I think that's important to know, for the public to know, that there wasn't an issue that they were trying to fix. Rather, they created the problem out of nothing.
Right.
Wow. You mentioned the governor and his policies. You know, the issue in Flint. I mean, that was humongous, and I don't see anybody being really held accountable, you know, to that. And his policies have been, you know, I don't want to get, you know, from one side to the other, but you know, to attack the pensions of teachers, to attack, you know, public service individuals who, you know, need their retirement plans, teachers who are really the core of our societies, and no one is really being held accountable. You two have been in Lansing. You've done amazing work in terms of resolutions, legislations. I mean, you are both on the ball. But how do we hold that portion of our government accountable, and what can we do as citizens, you know, to support you to be able to, you know, move forward and hold, you know, our legislators accountable to these changes that is really hurting everyone and benefiting one portion again of our society. Senator?
You know, so it's actually a really good question, because what we've seen on the back end of the presidential election is a significantly greater number of our constituents who want to be engaged, who want to have their opinions be known and want to have access to their government.
I think people woke up.
Right.
They definitely woke up.
And so, you know, what we're trying to do now as legislators is find what medium really works best for everybody. For some folks, it might be the phones. It might be social media. It might be an email. It might be coming to Lansing and meeting with legislators. But, you know, what I try to do for folks who are passionate about, maybe take, for example, the teachers' issues. I tell them, you know, with me and with with myself and with Representative Hammoud, you know, we get the issue, we understand the issue, we think we're on the right side of the issue, but there's a lot of people in Lansing who are not. And so we're encouraging our constituents to also feel comfortable to pick up that phone and to call other legislators across the state, to get people who live in that legislator's district to pick up the phone and call them as well. Because, you know, when a legislator goes onto the floor of the House or the Senate and they think that nobody's watching and they think that nobody is paying attention to how they vote, they're going to do whatever they want to do. But when they know that there's 5,000 teachers in their area who are watching them and are going to hold them accountable and who are going to go out and make sure that they work to either get them elected or get them unelected next go around, it changes the way that these politicians work. And so, you know, sometimes it feels very defeating, where you'll pick up the phone, you'll do a lot of advocacy, and you still might come up short. Lansing still may come up with the numbers to pass the bill. But again, knowing that it's a process and knowing that the more voices that we add to that process, the better it is. The rep has a great line, I won't take it from him, about how citizens affect that change in the policy. But the legislature only knows about it if the citizens choose to be engaged.
Correct.
And so we're trying to find ways to make it easier for folks to become engaged in that process.
You know, the overall environment right now is a very dangerous one, given all the messages coming out from Washington and all the conflicting messages. Representative Hammoud, you've actually presented some legislation about civil rights and about the issue of hate crimes that has totally increased. Not only, locally, but nationally. I mean, this is a national crisis, and you've addressed it in this piece of legislation. I know there's a whole bunch of different components in there, but what's the overall theme of that, and how are we addressing it, and how is it received on the floor?
So the package of bills known as the My Civil Rights Expansion Package, essentially what it tries to do is create a roadmap for states to adopt policies that ensure the civil rights of all individuals, regardless of any component of their identity. And we've done that through a series of 14 bills and 2 different resolutions. And this provides economic incentives for individuals to be able to contribute back to society, create more jobs, as well as ensure individuals aren't fearful of taking their kids to schools or going to seek help from a provider or a hospital because of fear of what country or origin they have or what religion they follow. So that's what this package of bills tries to do. And we had I alongside I believe 14 other of my colleagues each took on one of these bills and introduced it. So we had great support there, as well as it received the endorsement of the ACLU, the National Association of Social Workers,
as well.
MGAGE as well, several other organizations. And now it's my hopes that throughout this, during the summer, as we focus back on constituent services, I also want to take this opportunity to reach out to organizations all across the state and really build support from all walks of life, from various backgrounds, from various organizations and groups, and to come back in the fall and say, to my representative colleagues up from the UP or from out west, well, you have your mayors and your city councils and organizations from your neighborhoods who support this package as well, to show that this is not something that's just a focus for individuals here in Southeast Michigan, or that this package of civil rights bills is not just a focus for communities with a large minority population or large communities of color. That this is something that has
sort of a
broad
model
support.
kind of thing.
Exactly. And then it's my hopes also, in reaching out to several national organizations, that this package is a model for other states, that they can just adopt this bill language and introduce a legislation themselves in other states and try to use this as a roadmap for their states. Because we took the best policies from various states, put it all together, as well as created new policy and introduced that.
So what are the 2 most vibrant components of this bill? I know you have, like we said, there's a whole bunch of different moments, but what are the 2 most vibrant of those?
I say the key piece of legislation ensures that we have a clear roadmap for ensuring that our local police and our communities are working cohesively together. That we don't have a federal government. We've already seen the state try to balance the budget on the backs of local municipalities. And now we see the federal government trying to task our local police with tasks that should be for immigration officers and not for our local police. One, we don't receive
profiling.
Exactly. It's more than just profiling. We don't receive funding from the federal government to fulfill the jobs of immigration officers. And this is basically saying, why don't we just keep it separated? Obviously, let's coordinate where we can through constitutional means, when judicial warrants are presented, so on and so forth. But let's try to keep them separated. Let's ensure that our local police and our community have a relationship where everybody feels comfortable, where the tensions are low, given the recent highlight of increased tensions between police and community in several areas across the state. But let's just ensure that there's a cohesive relationship there and that we're not adding any policy that may be detrimental to that.
Right, police officers are not ICE agents, basically, and there needs to be that distinction distinction. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied here. But I think these were very well thought out, and I think a lot of what happens in Washington is there's all these bills that go through, and even with the Health Care Act, a lot of the legislators just go, oh, okay, this sounds good. They don't read it. They don't know what's going on, and then they sign it, and then who suffers is all of us. You were very vocal in regards to financial transparency in elections and what have you, and I think given our local climate too, there has been a lot of issues, a lot of action items, if I can represent them that way, and that's really important. And I think that is something that needs to be highlighted a lot more. Transparency, not even on the local level, but even on the national level, because obviously, this presidential election has really broadened and opened a lot of people's eyes, sort of like waking up the sleeping giant. But what is your take on that, and how do you look at it locally and nationally as well?
So when I talk about this system of government that we're in, it's broken in a number of different ways. And the way in which we elect individuals to office is one of the ways in which our government is broken. And I say, the two biggest errors, if you will, one is the redistricting process and how we let politicians decide who their voters are, not the other way around. It should be the voters deciding who their politicians are. Gerrymandering, absolutely. And then secondly, the influence of money in politics. And as folks probably know,
to me if I give you money.
And as folks are familiar with, we had a Supreme Court ruling called Citizens United, and Citizens United said that money is equivalent to speech, and so that you can't restrict an individual or a corporation's ability to give money or to plug money into the political system. As you and I and everybody at home knows, money in politics is an incredibly corrupting force. And so what I have said from day one is, one, we need less money in politics. And two, the money that we do have in politics, we need to have greater transparency over who it's coming from, who it's going to, and what purpose is it serving. And if you look at different different states across the country, friends of mine who are state reps in the Southwest United States, they have to get 200 of their constituents to give them $5. Once they do that, the state gives them $30,000 as a publicly funded campaign, and that's it. That's all they have to run on their campaigns. But with the influence of dark money, you have individuals like, we talked about Betsy DeVos earlier in the system, the education
Well, she was
department.
very clear.
Oh, yeah.
She was very clear as to, the fact that why she was in her position.
When politicians try to increase the donor limits, think about this for a second. I think about my parents, Dave and Lily Knezek. If the politician said, hey, Dave and Lily, you can give $10,000 to your son to run for office, my parents would say, well, we don't have $10,000 to give. But any millionaire, any billionaire, $10,000 is a drop in the bucket to them. So when you increase these limits, it only serves to help one group of people, and it's the people who have the means to continue to corrupt the system of government that we have today. And so again, if we're able to fix gerrymandering and if we're able to fix the influence of money in politics, I think one, you're going to get better people elected to office, and then two, you'll have a much smoother run government, which again benefits everybody in the process. Absolutely.
You both ran some amazing campaigns. Representative Abdullah, your campaign was really stellar, and you ran on the auspices of the issues and the topics, and you were very well informed. Through that process, and I want to talk about it because you're newly elected, and something that really was unprecedented in regards to you winning that seat, and the process in which you actually won that seat was amazing. So tell us a little bit about that experience and what you learned basically in regards to campaigning and the transparency process and how you applied it to your campaign.
Of course. So first and foremost, I had a good advisor.
Yes, I know.
Right?
I know.
So Senator Knezek. So that's always helpful.
Always good to have a solid partnership.
Yeah. And it's not just a partnership; it's an individual who's willing to give you the blunt truth. It's not just the truth that thinks will satisfy you. But when it came down to running for office, our focus was on the issues, but it's how do you get your message across to the voters?
Sure.
And we knocked doors day in and day out. We knocked in the primary around 20,000 doors. By August, when our primary rolled around, we had roughly 17 points of contact with every single voter that was going to the polls. And I think that's something
pounding the pavement.
Exactly. So we knocked the doors 3 to 4 times each household. We also delivered about 10 mailers, and we had some general mailers, but then we got really specific in our mailers, so people knew what Team Hammoud stood for. And we had a mailer pertaining to issues pertaining to our seniors, pertaining to healthcare, the environment, the economy, roads, so that everybody knew what I was set out to do. And our messaging, when it came down to how we identify those issues, it wasn't that I announced for office and I already had this platform created. My campaign platform was actually created knocking the doors.
Right, talking to people
by
one-on-one.
canvassing. And that's how we put together all this information, and it resonated really well with the residents, and I think that's what stood out. Then secondly, in a pool of candidates where most of us did not have elected experience, and so there you ask yourself, well, I know what you are as a candidate, but I'm not really sure what you'd be like as an elected official. And so I ran on the notion that take the same tenacity I am putting in this campaign, and that's the type of legislator I want to be. And I think that resonated real well. It got to the point where I knocked the door of a constituent, and it was the 4th time I'd knocked this door. And he opened the door, and he just said, "Abdullah, stop coming to my house." 4 times is enough.
I get it.
You're very eager, and so you have my support. And that was a good message. I'll take that.
Sure.
Some individuals, even if we knew, this is the 3rd time knocking the door, they had the lawn sign of my opponent, we never strayed away. We still knocked that door with the hopes that we'd make their decision difficult. If they thought they had their mind set, I still wanted them to go on election day and have a difficult choice of bubbling somebody else's name, because I wanted to really showcase that we were the hardest working team out there. And thankfully, it paid off.
It paid off. And you know what? Listening to the residents, listening to the citizens and the issues that are very concerning to them, that's what it's about. And sometimes politicians veer away from that, and they don't remember that they're out there to address the issues that are vital to their constituency. What is your thought? Last comments in about 35 seconds in regards to our current atmosphere. I mean, you're a veteran. You've done some amazing work, and that's why I wanted the both of you here, because I know you work very, very well together, and you complement one another. And talk about the issues. And you're young blood. You wanna get things done. You want to do it in a positive way, and you want to address the issues that are at hand, not because those are the popular things. So, what would be your message to the citizens out there in regards to our current political atmosphere and moving forward in regards to you as a political leader?
And it really kind of doubles back on what the rep just said. Consider for a second that when you sent me to Lansing, or you sent Representative Hammoud to Lansing, we walked through that door with a healthcare background and a military background. And so we're not experts in everything. Most politicians think they are, and they're not. And so the role that the citizens have in this process, I think, is more important now than it ever has been, making sure that we understand when we're voting on an issue that affects teachers, we need to hear from teachers to see how it affects them. When we're voting on an issue that affects police and fire, we need to hear from them. If we're voting on an issue that affects the middle class, we need to hear from people. And so, as we move forward and we see all this, the negativity coming out of Washington and coming out of Lansing, for me, it's frustrating because all of the time that we spend on the bickering back and forth and the arguing about what's real and what's fake and the whole 9 yards takes away from us having a really robust conversation about how to create jobs in this state and in this country, how to put people back to work, how to increase the quality of life for everybody here in Michigan and in the United States. And so the reason I think that we have worked well together, like you're saying, is we're focused on the issues, and we understand that it's real people who are hanging in the balance when the legislature makes a bad decision. And so you just always have to keep yourself humble and keep yourself focused on what really matters.
And you're focusing on what you know, and that's wonderful. And I wanted to talk to you about your military legislation with celebrating moms in the military and those other things. So I hope you'll come back and we can do that, because that's some amazing work. Thank you both so much for being with me today on Off the Cuff. You're doing amazing stuff, and you're there working for the people, and that's what really puts you aside from a lot of our other legislators. And I'll say that bluntly. So thank you so much for being there and representing us. And thank you all for joining us on Off the Cuff. Have a wonderful day.